Hello everyone and welcome to this week's video. Ministry brings with it many rewards alongside the challenges. As I look back over the past year, one of the most rewarding have been a series of spiritual question time evenings I've led with Dean Sarah. They're very simple to organise. We gather usually in a room, in a pub or village hall. People write their questions and Sarah and I attempt to answer them. The answers are not glib, I hope. Where the answer is, I don't know, that's the answer we give. Where we can only live with mystery based on trust, that's what we share also. Honesty, authenticity and humanity can gain a hearing, even amongst the most cynical. We're going to carry on next year. There are still some slots available, so do check out the Diocesan website for details. It's one of the easiest things you could invite a spiritually curious friend to. As we read the accounts of Jesus' ministry, we often find he started his teaching from a question. Just like today, people were spiritually curious. They wanted to ask about the big questions of life, death, and judgment. The less educated loved it when Jesus got one over on the scribes and the Pharisees, who deployed their great learning to get around Scripture's plain teaching rather than obey it. They asked questions about mysteries like suffering, although unlike us, they saw God's hand in every part of life. Their worldview of God's sovereignty meant they were always seeking a reason for everything that happened. Rather like Job's useless comforters, they thought that if bad things happened, it must be God's judgment and punishment for doing something wrong. Conversely, if good things happened, it was a sign of God's deserved blessing for good behavior. This attitude remains common in popular spirituality and is embedded in the truth frameworks of Islam and Hinduism. In pastoral encounters, I frequently hear people say things like, "What have I done to deserve this?" In Luke chapter 13, Jesus is in conversation with people asking about an atrocity in the Jerusalem temple, where Roman soldiers killed some visitors from out of town in the very act of worship. He says, "Do you think that these Galileans were worse sinners than all the other Galileans because they suffered in this way? I tell you, no." He goes on to draw on a natural disaster to make the same point. Or those 18 who died when the Tower of Siloam fell on them. Do you think they were more guilty than all the others living in Jerusalem? I tell you, no. So he rules out a direct cause and effect. Bad things do happen to good people. It wasn't their fault. There is a necessary randomness about life in the way God has ordered it. However, he doesn't leave it as a philosophical conundrum. There are things that can be learned at a personal level. He follows each no with the stern injunction, "But unless you repent, you too will all perish." In this season of Advent, we are invited to consider the eternal judgment Jesus alludes to in these stern words. Whilst human suffering can't be explained in a simple transactional way, nonetheless, actions do have consequences. His stern rebuke to contemporary Jewish religious leaders was the presumption that they could basically do what they liked and they'd be okay in the end because they were God's chosen people. Paul's encouragement to the persecuted Christians to pray for their persecutors was predicated on the idea that they, like the early Christians, would repent and be forgiven or experience eternal consequences for their brutality. Justice would be served one way or the other, and therefore there was no need to take their own revenge. Our culture today balks at the idea of such accountability. An accusation of being judgmental is about the worst insult you can throw at someone. But having a sense of ultimate accountability for one's actions can be a strong motivator for behaving well. This is not the same thing as Orthodox patriarchs saying to Russian soldiers that their war in Ukraine is a sacred duty that will get them into heaven more quickly. Such vile distortions of the truth have been deployed by unscrupulous leaders throughout history. However, if we approach life secure in the knowledge that the gospel enables forgiveness when we fail, which we all do, whilst holding out a standard to which we are called and to which our adherents will one day be called to account, we will be appropriately serious about moral purity. The grace of the gospel is not to be presumed upon as a get-out-of-jail-free card to avoid responsibility for our actions, but as a blessed gift to deliver us from the consequences of our sinfulness. This framework of judgment and grace is a powerful incentive to pursue a life of holiness.